Well, welcome back. And what we're going to be talking about today is lesson 5.2b, or day 2, probability and general addition rules. All right, probability and general addition rules. Well, here is some basic uh, notes that you might want to take on this. First off, when you talk about probability and basic addition rules, is that we want to know how to make two-way tables and Venn diagrams. You might be very familiar with this back in Algebra 1 or even the grade school sometimes. But a two-way table is essentially when you have two related events and you're making a table of these different events. So you have event A and B, and we talked about in the last video, in the last section, about the complements. So not B, so this means not B, okay, happening, and this is not A happening. That's what the complement is, not A happening. And so this basically tells you all the values in this particular event. Now, one thing that you have is you have some margins, okay? And in these margins that you put together is that you have, so B, 4 things happen of here. We have here 6, here is 3, here is 7, and this final box right here, these both sides have to add up to be the same value, which is 10. So the probability of A and B happening, this is where we'd have an end statement or a jointed statement of the probability of A and B happening. This is an end symbol, and that would be 1 out of 10. That'd be a 1 out of 10 opportunity. Okay, so A and B happening, and that's where we have a jointed event. This same thing can be said in a Venn diagram. We have A and B. Now the thing is that when you have this jointed event, this is where we have the jointed, where they overlap. This is why Venn diagrams are used. So this is not a mutually exclusive thing, but what we have A and B happening. So we would have, well, 2 where just A happens, 3 where just B happens, but together these overlap at 1. And so when you have A occurring, these add together to be 3. In the same way, if you take these two values, 3 and 1, we can see that 3 and 1, how much does it take for B to happen? Well, B happened 4 out of 10 times. And then finally, where does A, A not happen and B not happen? This would be our 4. And this is where we have that, okay, where B or A or and A are both not happening. That would be like they're not happening together, so that'd be, I guess, be kind of like a mutually exclusive event on the outside. All right, and hopefully that makes sense when we're going through and looking at that. So I'm just going to erase this a little bit right here, because from here we can see a general rule of addition. So when you have a jointed event like A and B, you notice that it is some overlap. So before we said if we have an OR event and they're mutually exclusive, the probability of A plus the probability of B, that would be it. And so you could say, okay, well, that would be probability of A is going to be 3 out of 10, probability of B is 4 out of 10. Okay, so that would be 3 out of 10, and that would be 4 out of 10. And if you add those together, it would be 7 out of 10. However, you notice that this is used once. And so basically A and B, they're overlapping. So they'd be used more than once. And so what happens is you have to subtract the event of that one overlap. And so it only can be counted once, so we would subtract that one. So instead of having 7 out of 10, it would actually be 6 out of 10. All right, the probability of having a 6 out of 10. How can you add it together? Well, if you add up all of these values together in this box, you realize, or out of these, you can see that an OR event happening is 2 plus 1 plus 3, which is 6 out of 10. And that's what this general addition rule of probability means. Whenever you're taking the probability of a jointed event, all right, of A or B, then you need to make sure you subtract that overlap. You subtract the overlap of that end statement. And then finally, if A and B are mutually exclusive, so A and B are mutually exclusive, that means they cannot be overlapping. So that probability of this overlap is 0. So that's why we have this for mutually exclusive events. Technically, probability of A plus probability of B minus 0 is literally this, which we talked about in the previous section. And so that does not um, just obey the general rule of probability. That's what we have there. All right. So with that, we're going to stop here, and I'm going to do in our next video an example of using general addition rules for probability.